Hello, and let's talk about some movement across the membranes. All right, scrolling on down, I think. Here we go. All right, so movement across the membrane. This is an important point. Gases go through the wet phospholipid bilayer. Gases, like carbon dioxide, water, those are gases, and they're going to diffuse across that phospholipid bilayer. Ions, however, if you see an Na plus charge or a H plus or something that has a plus or a minus attached to it is an ion, and that and water have to go through the proteins. And remember, we talked about those proteins, the protein channels. So this is a great picture here. This is a really great picture of all the structures. Here's that integral protein, goes all the way through the phospholipid bilayer, all the way through. This is where ions and water are going to get pumped through. Big hit. All right. The peripheral proteins are on the surface, and you have all of this extracellular matrix, the ECM. You have carbohydrate chains coming off of these proteins. And then here's the filaments of the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton forms like the skeleton of the animal cell. It doesn't have a cell wall, and so the microfilaments and tubules will serve as the support structure inside of the cell. All right. So again, looking back at diffusion, we have going from high concentration to low concentration. Here we go, high, and it wants to move over here because it's going to the side with low concentration until it reaches that point of equilibrium. And this is just the same thing, but with two different solutes. All right, now, osmosis, remember, is the movement of water because we have to dilute that concentration. Now, these terms are important. You need to memorize these terms and understand them. Hypotonic solution has less solutes in it, less of these particles that are in it. A hypertonic solution has too much. Think about it. If you're hyper, you have too much energy. All right, so think of a hypertonic solution as having too much of the solute in it. So the water is going to go, water always goes from hypo to hyper. This is the very concentrated lemonade. We need to have water go into it in order to make it drinkable, to make it taste good. So it's going to go from hypo to hyper until it reaches equilibrium. Now notice here, it's the water that's moving. These particles can't move. So this water on this side, on the original hypotonic solution, that's going to decrease. See, the water has gone up the tube over there. All right, so let's take another look at what happens to the cell with a hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic solution. So here with the hypotonic solution, look at what happens. Water is going into the cell. Now, if the cell is already turgid, so it's already normal. This is a normal cell. It's nice. It's got enough water pressure to keep it to fully support it. And so if water goes into that cell is going to lyse. It's going to explode, and you can see that happen. So if water's moving in there. An isotonic solution, you have water going in and water coming out. This is a normal type of a cell. And then a hypertonic solution is shriveled up. All right. When we look at water potential, it's represented by this psi symbol here. It looks like the trident from Poseidon. And it is basically, it's water's ability to perform work while passing through the cell membrane. And all of these calculations, these numbers all have to do with the megapascals and everything have to do with the ability to do work. It's basically, here you have, well, I don't want to get you confused. We're not going to go into a lot of detail with it, but just recognize that that's water potential, that symbol here. All right, facilitative diffusion. Remember, we said that diffusion osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. All three of those are passive transport, even though facilitated diffusion means it's got to have a helper. There's got to be some way to help get that across the membrane. And now you know water and ions need help. They can't diffuse through. Oxygen and carbon dioxide, those are going to diffuse through the cell membrane. But water and ions have to have a helper. So they have to use those integral proteins. They're going to transport. And in this case, you can see high concentration going to low concentration. This does not require any energy. They just have to find that integral protein in order to be able to transport through, but they still want to go. This is going with across the concentration gradient, okay? Very important terminology. Think about it. If everyone wants to go in one direction, you're going with the crowd, right? You're going with the concentration gradient. That's the direction of movement. If you're going against the concentration gradient, then you would be going from low to high because things want to flow this way. And so now you're going the opposite. You would be going against the flow, so against the concentration gradient. So the terminology, with the concentration gradient going this direction, and against the concentration gradient is going low to high. All right, again, very important words that you make sure that you remember those. And then here, this is the same. This is also facilitated diffusion. The only difference here is that it kind of opens up. It like would open up here, bring this molecule in, and then open up down here to pass it through. It's still not active transport. It's not requiring any energy. All right, now here, active transport. Remember I said anytime you see the word pump, that's going to require energy. And we said that sodium and potassium ions have to, they have to go through the membrane. Now, or they have to go through facilitated diffusion. But if they are going against the concentration gradient, so they're going from low to high, it has to use energy. You have to pump it. It doesn't want to go in that direction. All right. So again, the proton pump, see these are ions here. When you see a plus or you see a minus after it. In next chapter, we're going to get into that in more detail so you understand what those mean. But for purposes of this to understand, these ions have to, look at what's going on here. We're going from low to high. That's why you need a pump. ATP is energy. Energy has to be put in here, and those ions have to be pumped across against the concentration gradient. Keep those words. All right, now active transport. So we had passive transport here as osmosis, diffusion, and facilitated diffusion. No energy needed. But whenever we need a pump, we're going to need energy. So if we're moving, if we're pumping things across the membrane, exocytosis and endocytosis, these are both, they require energy because look at this membrane has to do some crazy stuff in order to get things to come in or to leave. And exocytosis, this is the inside, and this is the inside, and this cell membrane wraps around. So this, you have this vesicle that has something that needs to get out of the cell, and it moves over here. It molds into the membrane and then becomes part of that membrane, and then it opens up and that membrane spits it out. Kind of like if you have a splinter and you can't get it out, after a couple days you notice it's gone. Well, that's how that's what happens, is it just spits that out over a period of time. All right, endocytosis, exo means out. So that's getting something that was made in the cell out, and endo means we got to bring something into the cell. So phagocytosis, cyte means cell, phago means to eat, and pino means to drink. So phagocytosis and pinocytosis. So phagocytosis means there's some food particle or some other substance that's outside. So here we are outside of the cell, we need to bring this in. You can see this cell membrane is wrapping around it, and it's going to bring that in. It's going to wrap around, and this membrane here is going to pinch off and bring that into the cell. All right, this is phagocytosis. Here's the solid particle here, and this is liquid with pinocytosis. All right, I think that pretty much covers everything from 1.3 that you need to know. Have a marvelous evening or day or morning or whenever you're watching this.